All right, Rabosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tammuz, Haba'alim V'Tova, Daniel and Batsheva Pava of Chashmonaim, Eretz Yisrael, in commemoration of their father, Rabbi Shmuel ben Yehuda Aryeh Vey of Philadelphia, on the occasion of his first yahrzeit. Rabbi Shmuel was a child survivor of Auschwitz and a Talmud Mufak of Rav Michal ber Weissmandel. He left 90 plus descendants who are Yirei Shamayim. May his neshama have an aliyah. Truly beautiful. Our week of learning sponsors: Steve Golaskov in memory of Tova Rabinowitz, Tova Bas Yoshua Yaakov Zichron Livracha, sister of Shavi Friedman, and in memory of Adina Zahavi, Adina Bas Sheva Bas Dov Ber Azriel Zichron Livracha, sister of Yossi Opendin. Our week of learning sponsors: Jeff Schwartz, commemoration of the first yahrzeit of his father, Shmuel ben Shimon Halevi Zichron Livracha, and Yehuda and Jenny Goodhart, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Jenny's father, Yeshaya Zalman ben Lazer Zichron Livracha. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today: Ken and Yocheved Gelula, in memory of Master Sergeant Zechariah Pesach Haber, Hashem Yikom Damo, who fell in Gaza on January 16th, 2024. Again, actually, the Gelulas really submitted a very beautiful piece about Sergeant Zechariah Pesach Haber. I'll read it to you just because it's beautiful and it gives us a little bit of a window into these precious neshamas that are Moser Nefesh for Am Yisrael, for Eretz Yisrael. He was 32 years old, beloved and devoted husband of Talia Friedman Haber, father of Sidayel, Shevet, and Nachliel. He was also the oldest son of Aaron and Miriam Haber, grandson of Debbie Wildman. And matter of fact, he was a brilliant man, a true embodiment of Torah Umada, Torah and science. Aside from always taking out some time to learn Torah, he was pursuing a doctorate in plant sciences at Tel Aviv University, developing a strain of wheat that would be able to grow in desert conditions. For this groundbreaking and game-changing research, Tel Aviv University plans on awarding him a posthumous doctorate. He was a true mensch and an exemplary soldier. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, may his neshama have an aliyah, and in the merit of Hashem, may all of our precious soldiers be zocheh to be successful. B'chol ma'aseh yadei, and may HaKadosh Baruch Hu return our hostages b'shalom and b'karov, and may it be a month of besoros tovos for Klal Yisrael. But so with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Actually, really not so much Gemara to do today, but Baruch Hashem, a lot of really fascinating information to cover today. Today's that, and I want to thank Rabbi Richter for giving Daf Yomi on Shabbos and yesterday. So begin on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph 13a at the two dots. V'lo asa traklin. So remember again, the Mishnah was discussing the halachas concerning division of property and how much of property you need in order to affect a division. So bottom line, what the Mishnah was teaching us was as follows: that in order to go ahead and force a division, each party has to be able to emerge with what is considered to be a significant amount of property. Now obviously, what's the definition of significant? That is going to depend on the item that we are talking about. So over here, the quotation from the Mishnah was V'lo asa traklin. So you can't go ahead and force the division of a mansion. Traklin is literally a mansion, a large estate, a large home, unless of course each party is able to emerge from that division with something substantive. So the Gemara says like this. The Gemara says, what about the following case? So I'll say, so remember, in a case, just so we understand our principles over here, in a case where the item in question, the shared property, is large enough so that each party would go ahead and emerge with something substantive, either partner could force the division, right? So for example, the simplest way to illustrate this is, if you have a field, you have a chutzner, and the chutzner has a minimum of 8 amas, so that upon division, each party would emerge with dalet amas. Dalet amas is the minimum amount of space that represents a meaningful or substantive chutzner, so either party could trigger that division. That's the halacha. Okay, conversely, if let's say the chutzner is less than dalet amas, so then halacha l'maisa, neither party could force the division. They are forced to remain as shutfin. And that was, so again, the Mishnah, so just going to Traklin over here. V'lo asa traklin, v'lo asa hamor, v'asa shov lachas, good. Good. Ad she'ehei bahen kedei lazeh u'kedei lazeh. So again, the Mishnah doesn't give the exact amount of space or the exact amount that would warrant the division of a mansion, but the principle is the same. Okay, so now the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, so we'll say, so now, here's the shayla. So let's assume for a moment you have a piece of property. And the piece of property, and let's just go with a field because it's the easiest objective illustration. The field has 6 amas. The chutzner has 6 amas. So therefore, again, at 6 amas, 3 amas apiece, neither party could force a division. So we'll say, so now, what about the following? This is incredible. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, is dina the good or agud? Rabbi Yehuda says there's another halacha. The halacha is called good or agud. What does good or agud mean? Good, so get Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, is dina the good or agud? It's right under that diagram in Rashi. Is dina the good or agud? Zesherot salachlok. So we'll say, watch this. So now, Reuven and Shimon own this chutzner together. There's 6 amas of space, 6 amas of area. Therefore, neither party has the ability to trigger a division on their own. Rabbi Yehuda says, there's a halacha of good or agud. What does this mean? Zesherot salachlok, omer lezesherot salachlok. So we'll say, so let's say Reuven wants to split the property. Shimon doesn't want to split the property. So Reuven could say to Shimon, O quotes li damim uknei lecha. So Reuven can say to Shimon like this: Shimon, either quote to me a price, right? How much are you willing to pay, right? How much are you willing to pay me to buy me out? Uknei lecha chalki. O ani akot damim ve'etin lecha chalkicha. Or so Reuven says to Shimon, either you quote a price and buy me out, or I'll quote a price and buy you out. She'i afshi bishus foseich, because I don't want to be partners anymore. I don't want to live here together with you. So I'll say, so this is the halacha of good or agud. So either you quote to me a price and buy me out, or I'll quote to you a price and buy you out. So according to Rabbi Yehuda says, one of the partners could force a buyout. Now, this is an advantageous buyout. Why is it an advantageous buyout? Because the Maisa, even though Reuven is the one who wants to get out of this, Reuven is saying to Shimon, I'll do either way. You quote to me a price and buy me out, or I'll quote to you a price and buy you out. So in other words, we'll make it fair, but Lamaisa, I don't want to remain in this situation. So Yehuda holds that Allah Lamaisa, either party can say to the other, buy me out or I'll buy you out. Incredible. So let's see the distinction. In a case of a chutzner where halacha l'maisa, each party ends off with what we call a substantive amount. So let's say in the case of a chutzner, it's at least 8 amas. So you're just going to walk away with 8 amas. Either party could go ahead and force the division. And the division is clean. You get this side, I get that side, and shalom al Yisrael. In a case where there's not enough to trigger a division, Rabbi Yehuda says either party could trigger a buyout. Good or agud. Buy me out or I'll buy you out. Okay. Rav Nachman Amar, no. Rav Nachman Amar lei. So Rav Nachman Amar, less dina de good or agud. Rav Nachman says no. There's no concept like that. You can't force a buyout. That's the whole chap. Where there's less than 8 amas, so again, there's no ability to force a buyout. Now, again, I will say, obviously, if the parties are agreeable to it and they agree to buy each other out, that's one thing. But Lamaisa, neither one could force a buyout of the other. Look at Rashi, less dina, shezeh yachol omer lo, lo shelcha ekne, velo sheli emkor, elo shutfin nihye ba. So I will say, so ultimately, so Rav Nachman says, no. Rav Nachman, so again, I will say, so let's just play this out. Reuven goes over to Shimon. Reuven says to Shimon, here's the deal. I want to be your partner, right? I want to be your partner. So either you buy me out or I'll buy you out. Rav Yehuda says, absolutely works, and Shimon has a choice. Get bought out or buy out. Rav Nachman says, no. Shimon can say to Reuven, go fly kite. I'm not interested in buying you out, and I'm right, and I don't need you to buy me out. I'm perfectly content with this situation. So I will say, so this is our machlokes. Quite fascinating. I will say, and I think also, it's interesting because what Rav Nachman is saying, right? Rav Yehuda almost to understand a little bit that either party could trigger a buyout because in such a small area, it might be uncomfortable. It might be uncomfortable to go ahead and be partners with someone, right? In other words, you're talking. Obviously, let's say if you whatever the parcel is, whether it's the mansion or whether it's the chutzner, if you're dealing with a non-divisible area, that's a pretty small area. So Rabbi Yehuda will say, you know what? It's pretty inconvenient to be sharing such a small space together with someone else. So therefore, you should be able to trigger the buyout. Good, oh, I'll good. Buy me out, or I'll buy you out. Rav Nachman says, no, you can't trigger the buyout. What's the pshat? We'll say, Rav Nachman could say, sometimes life is about living with inconvenience. Like, in other words, we like to think that everything should be convenient, and everything should be comfortable, and everything should be easy. That's what we like to think. Rav Nachman says, that's not how life works. Life, by definition, has some level of discomfort. You're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be tired. You're going to be inconvenienced at times. That's the way it works. So man up, right, and deal with it. We spend so much time trying to make everything comfortable and convenient that we forget that life, by definition, has an element of inconvenience associated with it. And the whole yesod of life is to power through and to make our peace with the inconveniences. Well, so you know what happens? Do you know what happens if you convince yourself that life has to be convenient and comfortable? You accomplish very little. If you always have to be comfortable and convenienced, you accomplish very little in life. But if you're willing to accept the fact that there is a heck of a lot of discomfort and a lot of inconvenience, then you could power through pretty much anything and everything. That's the machlokes over here, right? Rabbi Yehuda says, it's got to be convenient. It's got to be convenient. Good or good. Rav Nachman says, who says? Life is about learning to live with the inconvenience and discomfort. If you could get over that, there's no telling what you can accomplish. Incredible. Let's go back to Rav Nachman. So we'll say, so Rav says to Rav Nachman, Lididach de Amrit, less dina de good agad. So Rav says to Rav Nachman like this. Rav Nachman, according to you, you hold there is no din of good or agud, right? So we'll say good means again, all right, good means buy me out or I'll buy you out. So the Gemara says, Rav says to Rav Nachman, according to you who do not subscribe to this, so the Gemara says, Bechar upashit sheniach lehanavian eved ubehema tmeya keitzad osim. So Rav said, this is an interesting case. So let's say Reuven and Shimon are brothers. We'll always use Reuven and Shimon, right? Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Their father was Yaakov. Reuven is the Bechar. Shimon is the younger son. So father Yaakov dies and leaves behind an Eved Kenani, and a behema tmeya, right, and an animal. So I'll say, so now the two brothers have to share in this, right? This is their Yerusha. So we'll say, so now watch this. So now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, what could they do? So Reuven could go over to Shimon. Now remember again, Reuven as the Bechar gets pishnayim, right? He gets a double portion. So Reuven could go over to Shimon and say, Shimon, good, oh, I'll good. Buy me out or I'll buy you out. That's it. Because we'll say, remember again, what's the alternative? The alternative is Reuven uses it 2 days because he's the Bechar, he gets double portion, and Shimon uses it 1 day. So according to Rabbi Yehuda says, Reuven can go over to Shimon, says, Shimon, listen, either buy me out or I buy you out. This doesn't make any sense to me. Rav is according to Rav Nachman, you who don't subscribe to good or agud, which is how are they going to use this? Kate said osin. How are they going to use this? What's going to happen over here? Reuven's going to use it for 2 days, and Shimon's going to use it for 1 day. This seems to be the most inconvenient setup possible. Look at Rashi, just a moment ago. Say, Eved o behema tmeya. She afsha the chalkan. So the idea over here is these are indivisible items. Right? In other words, you can't divide the Evan in half. You can't divide the Behema Tmeya in half. So the only way to use them is literally, again, Reuven is going to use it for 2 days and Shimon is going to use it for 1 day. So the Gemara says, but again, there seems to be just an untenable situation. Amrlei, so Nachman will say, Shani Omer, Oved Lezeh Yom Echad, Ulezeh Shni Yomim. So Nachman says, yeah, Reuven's going to use it for 2 days, and Shimon's going to use it for 1 day. That's it. In other words, I got it. It's in, or in other words, we'll say, or Reuven's going to use the animal for 2 days, and Shimon's going to use it for 1 day. I got it. It's inconvenient. Life is inconvenient. It's a doable scenario, not the best situation, but what are you supposed to do? So we'll say good. So basically, Gemara is the kasha. Mishe chatziav eved v'chatziav ben chorin. So we'll say, listen to this. Someone who's a chatziav and chatziav ben chorin. So what is this a case of? So just to illustrate this for just a moment, right? So let's say, for example, Ruvain owns an eved Kanani, right? Eved Kanani, a non-Jewish servant. What does he? Actually, no. I'm sorry. Let's say it differently. Ruvain and Shimon own an eved Kanani jointly, right? So they own in partnership. They own eved Kanani. What happens? Ruvain decides to emancipate his part of the Eved. So he could do that, right? He owns half of the Eved, he emancipates his part of the Eved. Now what happens to an Eved Kanani upon emancipation? He becomes a full-fledged Jew. So we'll say, so now you have an interesting case of a Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin. So this guy now is literally, again, half slave, half free man. That's his case, Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin. So Misha Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin, Ovedes Rabbi Yomi Echad, Ves Asmo Yomi Echad, Divrei Beis Hillel. So Beis Hillel will say, what does a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin do? How does he live his life? Well, one day he'll work for his master, and one day he'll work for himself. Right? In other words, right? Because again, one day he's half slave, he's half free man. So one day work for his master, one day work for himself. Beis Shammai says, "Takantem es Rabo es asmo lo takantem." So Beis Shammai says, here's the problem. Here's the problem. That is a great remedy for the master, not a great remedy for the emancipated part of his persona. In other words, so got it. The master will get right every other day of servitude of work. But what have you done for the emancipated parts of the Eved? Why? Listen to this. So the Gemara says, Lisa Shivcha Ini Yachol. He can't marry a Shivcha. Now we'll say, why can't he marry a Shivcha? Why can't he marry a non-Jewish maidservant? Why? Because he's half Jewish. He's half Jewish. Lisa's Baschorin Ini Yachol. He also can't marry a regular Jewish woman. Why not? Because remember again, he's a Chatzi Eved. So we'll say, so this guy literally, again, as they say, nishtahim nishtaher, right? He's literally, he's no one. He's no one because, again, he can't, now again, he's a no one in terms of marriage. He can't marry a shifcha, can't marry a non-Jewish maidservant because he's half Jewish. He can't marry a Jewish woman because he's in half Eved. So the Gemara says, now therefore the Gemara says, Yibatal, so what, he shouldn't marry, he shouldn't have children. V'alo, lo nivra ha'olam ela leperi v'rivya. The world was created ultimately again for propagation, for proliferation, for having children. Shneimar, lo sol bara l'sheves yitzara. So literally again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not create the world to be desolate. So it's interesting. So Beis Shammai says, you can't leave this guy in the status of a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin. You can't leave him like that. Because if you leave him like that, essentially it is impossible for him to marry and to have a family. So rather, what do we do? Ella kolfen es rabo the osin oso ben chorin. Rather, Rabbi say what we do is in this case we force Shimon to emancipate his chelek. We force Shimon to emancipate his portion, his ownership portion. The kosvin shtar al chatzi damav. Now, here's what's interesting. Now, it's very nice to say you force Shimon to write a document of emancipation. That's very nice, right, and very generous, right? What's the problem? Shimon then suffers a loss. So, in order to address Shimon's loss, what we say is Eved. Right? Let's call Eved, right? So now, emancipated Eved, we force the Eved to write a document, essentially an IOU, for his value to Shimon. So in other words, essentially, we force Shimon to emancipate his portion of the Eved, but we also force the Eved to pay his 50% of his value to Shimon. This way, Shimon doesn't suffer a loss. So we've seen this case many times throughout our journeys in Shas. So quite interesting. And now what's the chap over here? Here's what's interesting about this. The Chazru, Beis Hillel lahoros k'divrei Beis Shammai. And ultimately, again, we'll see what happens. And Beis Hillel ultimately came around and passed Beis Shammai. It's one of these interesting cases where it appears that Beis Shammai it's not clear if this is a chumrah or a kula, right? It sounds like over here that on one hand, it's a chumrah vis-a-vis the owner, right? It's a chumrah vis-a-vis Shimon. We force Shimon to emancipate his Eved, but it's almost like a kula vis-a-vis the Eved, that we allow the Eved to come fully emancipated. So we'll say, so again, one more time. Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin, Reuven and Shimon own an Eved Kanani together. Reuven emancipates his part, Shimon does not emancipate his part. Beis Hillel says, no problem, work for the master one day, work for yourself one day. You're half free, you're half emancipated, half an Eved. Beis Shammai says, that's crazy. That's fine, you've worked out the work situation, but what about his personal situation? He can't marry. Can't marry a shivcha because he's chatzi ben chorin. He can't marry a Basra, he can't marry a Jewish woman because he's a Chatzi Eved. So therefore, Beis Shammai says, we force Shimon to emancipate his chelek, thereby making the Eved a totally free man. Tell the Eved, you owe Shimon 50% of your value, representing the newly emancipated part. And Shalom Yisrael, what's the resolution? The Gemara says, V'chazru Beis Hillel horos k'dir Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel went ahead and came around to the position of Beis Shammai. One of these interesting situations, I will say, where Beis Hillel agreed with Beis Shammai, said, you know what, you're right. We can't leave him in this status of Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin. So instead we force Shimon, the remaining partner, to emancipate the remaining part of the Eved, and force the Eved to pay back 50% of his value to Shimon. So we'll say, so now, why is this being brought up over here? Look at Rashi. V'chazru Beis Hillel lahoros. It's the last short line in Rashi. Taima. Now, both say, now the reason we force Shimon to emancipate his portion of the Eved Kenani is why? Bibnei Tikkun Ha'olam, for the benefit of society. So the Gemara says, really what we say Tikkun Ha'olam, we mean for the benefit of the Eved. Ha lav mishum pirya v'rivya lo kaifina le. The Rebbe says, so let's just point out what was happening over here. Why do we force Shimon, the remaining partner, to emancipate his 50% of the Eved? Why do we do that? To remedy the Eved's situation, because the Eved is in this untenable situation, unsustainable situation, where he can't marry and he can't have a family. Now here's what's interesting. Now here's what's interesting. I would have thought that according to Rav Yehuda, what should the Eved be able to say to Shimon? What should he be able to say to Shimon? Good, good. Let me buy you out. In other words, literally again, in other words, you still own 50% of me. Let me buy you out. The fact that that's not brought up over here as an option, right? But rather the only reason we force Shimon, the remaining partner, to emancipate his remaining chelik of the Eved is what we call Bibnei Tikkun Ha'olam, for the benefit of society, because we can't allow the Eved to remain in this state of limbo. So you see from here that we do not hold of good or agud. We don't hold the position of Yehuda. To which the Gemara says, no, shiny hacha, the agud ika, good leka. I will say, here's the difference. The difference is, no. This is not a case of good or agud. Why isn't it a case of good or agud? Because at the end of the day, this only goes one way. The Eved could offer to buy out, right, Shimon's remaining portion. What can't Shimon do? Shimon can't buy out Ruvain's portion. In other words, the whole chap of good or agud, right? Rabbi Yehuda's whole chap is the parties can say to each other, it goes both ways. Either you buy me out, or I'll buy you out. In the Chatzi Eved case, there's it only goes one direction. The Eved, right, or the Chatzi Eved could say to the remaining master, I'll buy you out. Let me buy my remaining sad of Avdus from you and become fully emancipated. The master can't offer the Eved to what? Let me buy out your free portion and make you an Eved Kenani. That doesn't work, right? Because again, remember again, a Jew can become an Eved Kenani. So therefore, again, all the Gemara says is this is not a case of good or agud. This is not a case of I'll buy you out or you buy me out. Okay, so fine. I want to say, so we're still back to our regular machlokes. So I'll just point out, it's interesting. I've always thought that this case of Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Choron is always so fascinating, right? Of this individual who is a half a slave and half a free man. I don't know. I've always seen myself in this Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Choron case, right? What I will say, I think it resonates a lot with many of us, which is on one hand, I am free to accomplish so many different things. On the other hand, I'm an Eved to so many taivas, to so many desires, to so many averas, to so many different things. I will say, and what happens when you are a Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Choron? What happens when you're in that state? So the Gemara says, literally, you can't marry and you can't have a family. What does that represent? It represents that like you're stuck. You're stuck. I think so many of us experience this, that because there are certain parts of my life that remain unresolved, because there are certain things in my life that I'm an eved to. And I know what they are. I know exactly what they are. I know what the challenges are. I know the areas in which I'm stuck, even though I have this other side of me that is this Ben Chorin. And the Ben Chorin side is doing so many great things and accomplishing so many wonderful things. Because I am not resolving my Avdus side of me, I'm stuck. I'm stuck. So to speak, I can't marry. So to speak, I can't reproduce. So to speak, I can't. So the every day, the Ben Chorin side is accomplishing so many nice things. But the Avdus side is keeping me in place, and it's preventing me from moving forward. And that's why the only resolution, there's only one resolution to Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chor. What's the only, and even Beis Hillel comes along, what's the only resolution? Only resolution is, you have to get rid of your Avdus. Until I get rid of my Avdus, I'm stuck in place. Until I really find the courage to take care of the things that hold me back, to take care of the things that enslave me, to really deal with the Averas, to really deal with the Taivas that keep me rooted in place, I'm not going anywhere. So I think for many of us, we get in this state of like spiritual frustration where I'm doing so many good things, but why am I not moving myself forward? Why I feel like I'm running, I'm doing, I'm accomplishing, I'm learning, I'm this. Why am I not moving myself forward? And it's because a Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin can't marry, can't produce a family, can't move his life forward. He's stuck. It's only once we find the courage to deal with our personalistic avdus, it's only once we become fully free, a full Ben Chorin, that we have the ability to fully self-actualize. Incredible. Let's go weiter. Tashma, Shnei Achen, Echad Ani ve'Echad Ashir. But these are really great cases. Echad Ani ve'Echad Ashir. V'niach lana v'en merchatzu beis Habad. What's the interesting case? The two brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Now this is not a Bechar case over here. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's the same yisod. Two brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Brothers, father Yaakov dies. He leaves behind, right? And by the way, one brother, Reuven is wealthy and Shimon is poor. V'niach lahen avien merchatzu beis Habad. And Yaakov died and left behind for them a bathhouse and a press, an olive press. So I'll say, so now, what do the brothers do with it? So now, if these were rental properties, so in other words, Father Yaakov owned an olive press which was rented out, a bathhouse which was rented out. So fine, they're revenue producing. They're revenue producing property. You let it keep producing revenue and just leave it alone. However, asan la'atzmo. What happens if this was not revenue producing property? Instead, Yaakov used the olive press to press his own olives, or he used the bathhouse. This was his personal bathhouse. Suppose that is now what happens. So now, we'll say, so just before we go on, you're going to see what's the tension. So the wealthy son is going to be like, this is fantastic. I'll use the press to press my olives. I'll use the bathhouse, again, for myself, for my staff. Now, meanwhile, the poor son has no use for this, right? The poor son doesn't have olives to press, or not enough olives to make worth it the use of a press, or again, and doesn't really have any use for his own personal bathhouse. So now watch this. So the Gemara says, Ashir Omer La'ani. So the Ashir, right, the rich son, Reuven, could say to the poor son, to Shimon, Amud Beis, Kach lecha avadim v'yirchatzu b'merchatz. Kach lecha zeisim ubava asi bebeis Habad. So again, Reuven could say to Shimon, okay, Shimon, this is great. We have our own. Now father died. He left us this bathhouse, he left us this press, so bring your olives, use the press, bring your avadim, bring your servants, bring your staff, and they could all use the bathhouse. So the Gemara says, so look at Rashi, Kach lecha avadim, she'ischamamu oso urachatz bo v'lo matzi ani l'meimar lei kinei chalki. Now what's the chap over here? So the Brisa indicates that halacha l'maisa, if the rich son wants to hold on to the property, then halacha l'maisa, he could hold on to the property, and he could tell the poor son, he could tell his poor brother, listen, you know what? Get your act together. Go ahead, get olives, get servants, and then you too could use the press, and you too could use the bathhouse. So we'll say, but what's the chap? What doesn't happen over here? See, what doesn't happen over here is that the poor brother doesn't say to the older brother, buy me out. So again, the Gemara is bringing this as a kasha against Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda wanted to say that there's this concept of good or agud, right? Buy me out or I'll buy you out. So clearly, again, from this price, this would seem to be like a great case to employ that concept. One brother needs the press and the bathhouse, the other brother does not. So why can't the brother that doesn't go ahead and trigger a buyout? So the fact that that is not brought up as an option indicates to us that we reject the position of Rabbi Yehuda. To which the Gemara says, no. We'll say it's a pretty obvious answer over here. Why doesn't it work? Hasamnami good ika agud leka. They will say, remember again, the concept of good or agud works. Why? Because of mutuality. Because again, the brothers say either you buy me out, or in other words, they will say what makes good, according to Rabbi Yehuda, what makes good or agud a fair scenario is it's even-handed. In other words, that either you set a price and buy me out, or I'll set a price and buy you out. So the idea over here is that neither party is at a disadvantage. In this case over here, there's a rich brother and a poor brother. So whereas the rich brother has the ability to buy out the poor brother doesn't have the ability to buy out the rich brother. So in other words, even Rabbi Yehuda holds it's good or agud. So hasam nami good ika. In other words, rich brother could buy out poor brother, agud leka, but the poor brother cannot buy out the rich brother. So therefore, Allah L'maaseh, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that in this case, again, I know you know, but I'll just say it anyway. Obviously, in a situation where, let's say again, I will say in this scenario where Shimon, the poor brother says, sure, buy me out. Of course, Shimon could agree to a buyout, right? That's never a problem. The whole chap of Rabbi Yehuda is the ability to trigger a buyout, even if one of the parties doesn't want it. So what the Gemara is just simply suggesting is that concept of good or agud, of the ability to force a buyout, only works obviously if both parties have the capability of a buyout. Beautiful. Let's go back to Tashma. The Gemara goes right. So we'll say, so we're still left with this machlokes. So Tashma, kol she'ilu yichalik u'shma lav cholkin. So again, we'll say, what did we learn? So the Bryce is reminiscent of the Mishnah. So in general, whenever you have something that you want jointly owned property, so halacha l'maisa, the litmus test for division is like this: if the property can be divided and ultimately ushmo alav, and the identity of the property still remains in its divisible form. In other words, that it's large enough that even if you divide it, each chelik, each part still retains its original identity. Cholkin, then halacha l'maisa, you divide it up. Ve'im lav, and if not, ma'alin oso b'damim. Ultimately, again, we evaluate it. Now, what does that mean? Malin osan b'damim. Rashi says, "Hainu good or agud." So it's like today you have a brayso that explicitly supports Rabbi Yehuda. So what did the brayso say? If you have a piece of property that's large enough that when it's divisible, when it's divided, it still retains its original identity, then you could force a division. But if the property is not large enough so that when it is divided, each part retains its identity, then what? You could trigger a buyout, good or agud. So we'll say this supports Rabbi Yehuda, to which leads the Gemara to say, Tanaihi. In reality, this machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Nachman, is a machlokes tanoim. Do we say good or agud or not? Here we go. This nan tol atoshir vani pachos shomano. So I will say this is very interesting. This is very interesting. So I'll say, so imagine the following, look at Rashi just a moment. Tol atashir vani pachos, kigon chatzar she'in ba shmona amos, va'amar zeh, chaluk utolach al dalar amos, vani es amosar. So watch this, we'll say. Watch this. Reuven and Shimon own a chatzar together. Okay? Watch this. The chatzar is 7 amos. 7 amos. We'll say, what's the halacha with a 7 amma chatzar? Can you force a division? No, why not? Because again, you're going to have neither party, right? At least one party doesn't walk away with Dalar Almas. So watch this. Reuven says to Shimon, here's the deal. Here's what I'm going to do. You take Dalar Almas. I'll take whatever's left over. So in other words, in this case over here, what Reuven's saying to Shimon is, I want a division. I'm willing to give you something that is considered to be a substantive parcel. So you will get Dalar Almas, and I'll take the leftover. So the Gemara says, the Sanya, Tol Ata Shirvani Pachos Shomelo. So we'll say, the Tanakama says, Zabanan say, okay. In other words, we'll say, why not? As far as Shimon is concerned, Shimon is getting a substantive parcel. If Reuben is willing to take the loss, and Reuben is willing to take the loss, but they'll say, that halachically, that should be a proper type of division. Rabbi Shmuel says, no, Ein Shomelo. We do not listen to him. We do not listen to him. So we'll say, so now, which is actually quite interesting, right? That in other words, that we know, even though, now again, I will say, even though Reuven is saying to Shimon, you take the Dalet Amis, we do not listen to Reuven under those circumstances. So the Gemara says, okay, hey Chidami, what exactly is the case over here? Ile Makiditani. So we'll say, if it's just as it was stated over here, that literally Reuven is saying to Shimon, you take Dalet Amis, I'll take whatever's left over. So my time of Shem then I don't understand why not. What's the problem over here? Why wouldn't we accept this division? So we'll say, now watch this. You're right. There's something missing over here. Here's what you have to do. So here we go. So right, if Reuven says to Shimon, you remember again, we'll say, Chatzar is 7 amas. So Reuven says to Shimon, you take 4 amas and I'll take the rest. So we listen to him. The good, good, Ein Shomelo. Oh, okay, we'll say. So there's 2 cases contained in this brisa. What are the 2 cases? So we'll say, so watch this. Chatzar of 7 amas. Reuven goes over to Shimon. I will say there are 2 possibilities over here. Possibility number 1 is that Reuven says to Shimon, you take 4 amas and I'll take 3. What's the halacha in that case? Everyone agrees? It works. Why not? If Shimon's agreeable, in other words, we'll say, obviously, if Shimon's agreeable to it, and Reuben's agreeable to it, so fantastic. Reuben, you're only ending up with 3 amas. Okay, he accepts it upon himself. Leave it alone. Shimon is getting the amas, that's fine. However, if Reuben says to Shimon, good, good, listen, you buy me out or I'll buy you out, then I will say, then what? Then halacha l'maisa. Then halacha l'maisa, ultimately again, so then that's the machlokes. So here we go, let's read it. So the Gemara is Vachikamer, Tol ata shirvani pachos shomelo, the good all good nami shomelo. So the Rabbanan say like this. The Rabbanan say, whether Reuven says to Shimon, you take Dalet Amas and I'll take 3, right? Or Reuven says to Shimon, you buy me out or I'll buy you out. In either one of those cases, shomelo. We listen to Reuven. Rav Shmuel comes along and says, ain't Shomelo. Rav Shmuel says, I'll agree in case 1, disagree in case 2. I'll agree in case 1 that if Reuben says to Shimon, you take Dalet Amas, I'll take 3. Fine. But in good, good, I disagree. So we'll say, what do you see from here? That the machlok is good, good, but you buy me out or I'll buy you out, is a machlok is tanaim. The Rabbanan say good or good works like Rav Yehuda, and Rav Shmuel says good or good does not work like Rav Nachman. Incredible. Tish Gemara says, no, that's not it. The Olam Kidiktani. We'll say, actually, this brisa that we're quoting over here has nothing to do with good or good. So we'll say, what's the case of the brisa? The case of the brisa is as it's stated. It's a chatzar of 7 amas. Reuven saying to Shimon, you take 4 and I'll take 3. So we'll say, if that's the case, at the end of the day, why does Shmuel object to that? So again, if you have a chatzar of 7 amas, and Reuven says to Shimon, you take 4 and I'll take 3. Why? And Shimon is agreeable to that. Why would Rabbi Shimon Gamliel have a problem with that? Why would he say it doesn't work? To which the Gemara said, Mishum da'amar lei, ibid dummy, leslie dummy. Because I will say, what's the problem over here? It could very well be that we're talking about a case of where Shimon doesn't have money. So therefore Shimon says like this. If you're talking about a sale, then ultimately again, I don't have the money to buy you out. And if you're willing to give it to me as a gift, lo nechali, I don't want a gift. Dichsev v'sone matanos yichya. Again, as the pasuk says in Mishlei, he who despises gifts will live a long life. So I'll say, so the idea over here, so therefore the Gemara suggests something very interesting. The Gemara suggests over here, this is a different kind of case. In this case over here, again, it's a 7 amma chatzar. Reuven makes Shimon an offer. You take 4, I'll take 3. So Gemara says there's 2 possibilities that are happening over here. Either it's a sale or a gift. So we could be talking about a case over here where what? Where Shimon doesn't have the money to go ahead and buy out Ruvain. If that's the case, Shimon says, number 1, I don't have the money, right? Number 1, I don't have the money. Are you willing to give it to me as a gift? I don't want a gift. Why? Because he who despises gifts lives a long life. Now we'll say, first of all, what does that mean? And therefore, there's nothing to do with good or all good. Nothing to do with good or all good. We'll say, by the way, we've talked about this many times. What does this mean? Everybody likes getting gifts. It means you can never get a gift. So I'll say, so all Chazal, all Shalom Melech was sensitizing us to recognize gifts, not always. There are definitely altruistic and selfless gifts. There really are. But often gifts come with strings attached, right? Or gifts comes with some type of expectation of reciprocity or just something in return. So Shlomo just says, just be careful, because a lot of times what you think you're getting for free actually comes with a lot of expectations. And once there are expectations and once there's some feeling for a need for reciprocity, so suddenly again, your life is not exactly the same. Whereas sometimes if those gifts, as tempting as they are, that comes with strings attached, if you find the courage to say, no thank you, sometimes again your life becomes qualitatively so much better. Okay, in any event, say for I will say the bottom line is, we thought the Brisa was talking about good, all good, but in fact it's not talking about that at all. I'm going to lay by the Rabbi Yosef. How's Rabbi Yehuda? The Shmuel. So the Gemara says, by the way, the statement of Rabbi Yehuda is actually a statement of Shmuel. So both say, so now again, so just to point out, we're still left with this machlokes, good or agud. Rabbi Yehuda says, you could do good or agud, you buy me out or I'll buy you out. Again, I both say, I just want to point out, this is talking about, so right now we have 2 models, right? We have 2 models. Model number 1 is where the shared property is large enough for either party to trigger a division. Right, so when it's large enough, what's the definition of large enough? Definition of large enough is even in its divided state, each party walks away with something significant. Significant either can be used for its original form or it still has its same identity. Then either party could trigger a division. What happens when the shared item is not large enough to trigger a division? Rabbi Yehuda says good or all good. You could always say, one partner could always say to the other, either you buy me out or I'll buy you out. Rav Nachman says no, you can't force a buyout, but rather again, if it's not large enough, they may be forced to live together as partners forever. Okay, so now, Amalei Rabbi Rabbi Yosef, Had Rabbi Yehuda the Shmueli. Actually, Rabbi Yehuda's position of good or agud is actually really a reflection of Shmuel's position. Why? What did Shmuel say? Here we go. This nan, the Kisvei HaKodesh, so we saw this in the Mishnah, Kisvei HaKodesh, scrolls. Remember again, I was saying, they're Chumashim, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, they're Tanakhs, were written in scroll form. So Kisvei HaKodesh, Af Api Sheshneim Rotzim Lo Yachloku. Let's say Reuven and Shimon own a scroll of Kisvei Kodesh, whatever it might be. They own a scroll of Tanakh together, a scroll of Chumash together. So even if both of them want to divide up the scroll, you can. I must remember again, why not? Why not? That would be disgraceful to the scroll to actually physically split it up. Okay, V'amar Shmuel, Lo Shana Ala B'krach Echad. That's only true ultimately, again, if the scroll is in one, if the particular book is in one scroll. Aval b'shnei krichos cholkin. But halacha l'maisa again, if it's in 2. Rashi says, "Bekrach echad kol seferin asuyim begilyon v'myeviel lebeis din lachlok bizarnu aval b'shnei krichos kigon tar bekrach echad urevim bekrach echad." So let's say ultimately again, if the scrolls are in 2 sections, then ultimately again it would be fine. Cholkin less dina de good or agud. But I will say if you would think that there is no din of good or agud, my area bekrach echad afilu b'shnei krichin nami. Now I will say, now interestingly enough, if you would think that halacha l'maisa there is no din of good or agud, that you could trigger a buyout, then halacha l'maisa it would be true that the same issue would come up even if it was in 2 sections. Tergamar of Salman b'shishnei and rotzin. So Salman explains we're talking about a case where both parties wanted to go ahead and split up. So what says obviously when you have a situation where both parties want to split it, then obviously that changes everything. Amar Rameh says Hilchasa is dina de good or agud. So what says so resolution. Amemar says there is a halacha of good or agud. Amar Rav Ashi Amemar Had Rav Nachman Amar Le Mai. So Had Rav Nachman Mai. What about that which Rav Nachman said, right? What about Rav Nachman's statement? Amrlei, so we'll say, okay, Rabbi Meir comes along and he says, we pass like Rabbi Yehuda, that a good or agud, that when you have a property that is so small, or an item that is so small, that neither party could actively trigger a division, so halacha l'maisa we hold good or agud, right? That halacha l'maisa, again, one party could say, you buy me out, or I'll buy you out. So the Gemara says, so Rav Ashi said, what about Rav Nachman? Right, Rav Nachman says that we don't hold of good or agud. What do you do with his position? Amrlei lo shmieli. So he said, I never heard of Rav Nachman. You never heard of Rav Nachman. So the Gemara says, Kilomar lo svirali. Not that literally I didn't hear of him, but rather again, I don't hold of his position. So Amemar comes on record and says that Allah we paskin good or agud. Now again, we'll see the Rambam in just a moment. Let's first finish the sugya. V'lo, is that true? That ultimately again Amemar never heard, didn't hold the position of Nachman. What about the following? V'harav bar Chinana, Rav Dini bar Chinana, shavak lu avua tarte amsa. We'll say, watch this. Here we go, another case. So I'll say, Rav bar Chinana and Rav Dimi bar Chinana, brothers. So their father Chinana died and left behind two maidservants. Chad yada afyo b'shulei. One maidservant knew how to bake and cook. V'chad yada pilcha v'nivla. One knew how to sew and how to weave. So we'll say, two maidservants, both necessary skill sets. And we'll say now again, the obvious shaila is like, so how do you divide up this property? Less dina de good or agud. And Rava came along and said, there is no din of good or agud over here. Okay, so we'll say, so this seems to be a pretty strong refutation of Amemar, right? Amemar just said that halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, good or agud. Rav is coming along and saying there is no din of good or agud. To which the Gemara says, no, this case is not a good case. Why did Rav say? It's not that Rav was categorically rejecting the concept of good or agud. He was rejecting the application of good or agud to this case. Why? Shiny hasam dilamar mi boile tarvaihu ulamar mi boile tarvaihu. So I'll say, so ultimately, again, the issue over here is good or agud works well in a case where the division makes sense. In this case over here, I will say both of the sons needed both of the maidservants because the household required someone, ultimately, again, who could bake and cook, and someone who could sew and weave. In other words, both of these skill sets were necessary for the household. So what we're going to do in good or agud, you'll take the maidservant who could bake and cook, I'll take the one who could sew and weave, and what happens to the other necessary skill set? So therefore, again, that's why ultimately, again, that's why, who was it? Rava. That's why Rava said, in this case, there is no situation of good or agud. Rashi says, less tina the good or agud, the kofo lo says timea otfim biyafev v'lo limkar chelko. Because ultimately, again, you need both. So the Gemara says, Kika Amrlei, Shakal Atchada Va'anachada, Lav Good O Agutu. Because we'll say, ultimately, again, look at Rashi, Lav Good I Lo Amrlei, O Kach Shteim, O Ekach Shteim, Techo Echad Ein Bohen Kedei La'achad. So we'll say, so ultimately, again, Halacha L'maisa, halacha l'maisa, so this would not be a case where you could apply good or agud, because halacha l'maisa both are necessary. Kika amrli shakal atchad va'anichada lav good. So we'll say, because remember again, they both are. What are you going to do? So in other words, they were ready to divide things up. So to have one take one maidservant, one take another maidservant, this would not ultimately satisfy the needs of both of the households. I have a kisvei kodesh. So we'll say, but what about the case of Kisvei Kodesh? Where both require Kisvei Kodesh. Shmuel said this is only so when it's in one scroll. But in two sections, Cholkin, you could divide it up. Once again, we said already before that was a different case. Why? Because that was a case where both parties consented to the split. So obviously, anytime you have a case where both parties consent, that already becomes a different type of situation. So we'll say, so this ends the sugya. Right? Now, the next sugya, Tanabana, is going to be in Kisvei Kodesh. So also we'll get to that in just a moment. But what do we do with the case of good or agud? So essentially what we are left with over here is a machlokes of Yehuda and Rav Nachman. So you have a piece of property that Allah says too small for either party to actively trigger a split. Right? So let's just keep, the chatzar is the easiest illustration. I have a chatzar, right? Reuven and Shimon jointly own a chatzar that is less than 8 amos. If it's 8 amos or more, either party has the right to trigger a split. Why? Why? Because both parties will end up with a space of at least dalet amos. But now again, less than 8 amos, neither party could trigger the split. Can either party trigger a buyout? Rabbi Yehuda says yes. Good. Reuven says to Shimon, either you buy me out or I'll buy you out. Rav Nachman says no. You can't force a buyout, but they live together. So Rabbi say, how do we pass him? The Rambam passes in Hilchos Shchenim, Parak Aleph Halacha Beis. Echad mina shutfin, shamar lechavera b'makom she'ein bo din chaluka. Reuven and Shimon own something together jointly, and the item they own jointly is not large enough to trigger a division. Or b'davar she after sheyachluku could go and shifchar kli. Or Rabbi say, for that matter again, they jointly own something that can't be split, like a servant or a utensil. So both say one party could say to the other, and Reuven says to Shimon, "Mechar li chelkacha bekach, v'kach okinei mimeni kishar hazeh." And Reuven says to Shimon, either you buy me out or I'll buy you out. The Rambam Baskins hadin imo the kolfin esanitba limkar lechavera o liknos mimeno. We pass like Rabbi Yehuda, good or good. That's how we paskin. Halacha l'maisa, again, one party could force the other to go ahead and for a buyout. Now again, I both say the good news is that the price has to be something agreeable, right, to both of the parties. But l'maisa, one party with an this is now we have so I'll say therefore we have two division models, right? Division model number one is where the object itself is large enough to warrant a division. Either party could force a division when the object itself is either indivisible, like a shivchor, like a kli, or the property itself is too small to trigger a division. One party has the right to go ahead and order a buyout to the other party. Either you buy me out or I'll buy you out. Now again, halacha l'maisa. He says, "Aval eina tovea rotza liknos olo yimtza ma'yiknan." And obviously, again, that halacha l'maisa. This only works obviously if both parties have the means to go ahead and buy out. If there's not the means, then obviously everything changes. Then the case of the Rambam itself is even a little bit more complicated. But just for our purposes for today, we pass like Rabbi Yehuda, that ultimately, again, good or good, one party could force a buyout from the other party. Incredible. Let's say, let's speak in the next Gemara. So I'll say, so now we're going to talk a little bit about scrolls and how they're arranged. Meir says, you could put all of Tanakh in one scroll. Chumash, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim all in one scroll together. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Torah b'fnei atzmo, Nevi'im b'fnei atzmo, Ksuvim b'fnei atzmo. Rabbi Meir says, no, you can't do that. Rather, again, you put each one. Torah gets its own scroll, Navi gets its own scroll, Ksuvi gets its own scroll. The Chacham say, Kol echad ve'echad b'fnei atzmo. The Chacham say, I will say something very interesting. The Chacham take it a step further. The Chacham say that even in Nevi'im, right, every Navi should get its own scroll. Right, there should be a Yoshua scroll, a Shoftim scroll, a Shmuel scroll, right, so on and so forth. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ma'aseh b'baitos ben Zunin, shelo shmona neviim medubakin ke'achad apira b'Elazar ben Azariah." So we'll say there was baitos ben Zunin. This guy baitos ben Zunin had a scroll, a Navi scroll, and he had 8 neviim included in one scroll, based on the position of Elazar ben Azariah. Others say, no, Baitus didn't have multiple Navim in one scroll. Rather, again, he had one Navi per scroll. Amar Rabbi says, Rabbi says, once it happened, that they brought all of Tanakh in one scroll, in front of the Rabbanim, and ultimately, again, they said it was fine. Okay, bein chumash lechumash. So we'll say, so first of all, first order of business of here, machlokes, as to how you create your scrolls. Can you put all of Tanakh in one scroll? Or halacha l'maisa again, do you need Torah in one scroll, Nevi'im in one scroll, and the Ksubim in one scroll? Or maybe even you need Nevi'im. Maybe Nevi'im, each Navi should be in its own scroll. Okay, bein chumash lechumash al Torah abar shitin. Now we'll say, and this is very interesting, if you have a scroll, a Torah scroll, with all the different parashas of chumash, there needs to be at least 4 blank lines between each chumash, right? So from the conclusion of Bereshis to the beginning of Shmos, at least 4 blank lines. V'chein, bein kol navi v'navi. So you should have 4 blank lines in between each navi. U'benavi shal shnei masar gimel shitin. We'll say in Trei Asar, the 12 smaller naviim, ultimately, again, you should have at least 3 lines of empty space. U'misayim milamata, u'maschil milamala. However, if Rabbi say you end any particular section, whether it's a chumash or whether it's a navi at the end of one column, you begin at the top of the very next column and don't need any empty space. So we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up at Meretz Hashem with this sugya tomorrow, more about how they structure their scrolls. Afterwards, Rabbi say, shkoyach. All right, Rabbi, have a wonderful day. Great to see everyone.